An Apache beauty was bathing in the creek, and the rancher swore to protect her with his life. Birds sang in soft, sweet melodies, and the creek bubbled quietly as it wound its way through the valley. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. In this peaceful moment, nature seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the day to begin. Along the bank of the creek, an Apache woman stepped carefully, her bare feet sinking slightly into the soft sand. She moved with grace and confidence, the way someone who had lived all her life close to the land naturally moved. Her dark hair fell loosely down her back, catching the sunlight as she bent to touch the water. The creek was her sanctuary, a place where she could wash away the dirt and fatigue of her daily life and feel a quiet freedom. She hummed softly to herself, a melody from her people, letting it drift over the water and into the trees. Unbeknownst to her, a figure watched from the edge of the forest. A rancher, tall and rugged, had been riding his horse along the trail that followed the creek. He had been checking his cattle early that morning, as he always did, enjoying the quiet before the sun climbed high and the work of the day began. His eyes widened slightly when he spotted her. She was striking, not just because of her beauty but because of the calm confidence she radiated, blending perfectly with the wild landscape around her. For a moment, the rancher simply watched. He felt no fear, only a surprising sense of admiration and curiosity. He knew he must be careful. The forest was a place of both peace and danger, and he understood that sudden movements or loud noises could startle her. He urged his horse to stand still, and the soft sound of hooves against the grass was barely noticeable over the babbling creek. The Apache woman continued her morning ritual, unaware that she had an observer. She scooped water with her hands, letting it trickle over her arms and shoulders, feeling the coolness refresh her skin. Small fish darted around her feet and she laughed softly at their sudden movements. Her laughter was clear and pure, echoing across the water. It carried a sense of joy and freedom, something the rancher had not heard in a long time. He shifted slightly behind the trees, trying to hide his presence, but the sunlight caught his hat for a brief second. The woman paused, sensing movement, but the forest was full of sounds, and she thought it might be the wind. She returned to her bathing, unaware of the protective gaze fixed upon her. As he watched her, the rancher's thoughts began to turn serious. He had learned long ago that the world could be a dangerous place. Outlaws sometimes wandered through the forest, and travelers were not always safe in remote areas like this. Seeing her here, vulnerable and alone, stirred something deep inside him. A promise formed in his mind, as clear and firm as the creek running before him. He would protect her if she were ever in danger. Even if it cost him everything, he would keep her safe. The woman noticed a sudden rustle in the leaves. She paused again, her hand instinctively reaching for a small knife at her belt, though she had no intention of using it. Her senses were sharp. Living close to the land taught her to notice the smallest changes in her surroundings. Yet despite her vigilance, she felt no real fear. Something about the forest that morning and the gentle light on the creek made her feel calm and secure. The rancher decided it was time to move slightly closer, but still stay hidden. He wanted to understand the situation better before revealing himself, if revealing himself was even necessary. His heart beat faster, not out of fear, but from the intensity of the moment. Watching someone so free and untamed, he felt both awe and a strange protective instinct he could not explain. She finished rinsing her hair in the creek, letting the water run down and over her shoulders. As she reached for a cloth to dry her face, her eyes caught a glint of sunlight off something in the bushes. She froze, listening. The rancher held his breath, not wanting to startle her. The moment stretched, long and delicate, like the morning mist that hovered above the creek. Then a bird took flight, and she realized that the sound had been nothing but nature. She smiled to herself, shaking her head lightly at her own tension. She returned to her bathing, humming again, her melody mixing with the sounds of water and wind. The rancher relaxed slightly, but the sense of responsibility remained. He knew that danger could appear at any moment in these woods, and he could not turn away. After a few minutes, she moved to the edge of the creek, gathering her clothes and wrapping them around her. She looked around, enjoying the soft warmth of the morning sun on her skin. The rancher noticed her movements, the careful way she balanced on the rocks, and felt a renewed determination. If anyone were to threaten her, he would be ready. No one would harm her on his watch. Slowly, he stepped back into the shadows of the forest, allowing her privacy while keeping a careful eye on the surroundings. He began thinking about the world beyond the creek, the small town nearby, other ranchers, travelers, and the occasional band of troublemakers who wandered through the forests and hills. He knew that he could not always be nearby, but the promise he had made in that silent moment was unwavering. He would do everything in his power to protect her, even if she never knew his name or his face. The Apache woman finally gathered her belongings and began to walk back toward the deeper forest. She moved gracefully, barefoot on the soft earth, carrying herself with the quiet strength of someone deeply connected to the land. The rancher watched her go, and as she disappeared into the trees, he felt a strange emptiness. The brief glimpse into her life had stirred something in him that he could not easily forget. He mounted his horse, ready to continue his morning rounds, but his eyes kept returning to the creek and the path she had taken. He knew that this chance encounter would stay with him forever. Something about the way she moved, the serenity she carried, and the silent strength she exuded had left a deep impression on his heart. The promise to protect her was no longer just a thought. It had become a commitment that would shape his actions in the days to come. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the forest and creek, the rancher rode slowly, alert to every sound and movement. The day had begun quietly, but he knew that life in the wilderness was unpredictable. Yet for the first time in a long while, he felt a clear purpose. Protecting her, watching over her, and keeping her safe had become more important than anything else in that moment. And so, the day continued, with the creek glistening in the morning light, the birds singing, and the rancher riding quietly along the path. Somewhere in the forest, the Apache woman moved freely, unaware of the silent guardian who had made a promise that would not be broken. In the heart of the wilderness, two lives had crossed, and a story of courage, protection, and unexpected connection was beginning, one that neither of them would ever forget. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long beams of golden light through the trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of morning, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, and the soft murmur of the creek winding its way through the valley. Yet, despite the peacefulness of the day, the rancher felt a tension in the air. Something was stirring, something he could not ignore. He had been riding slowly along the edge of the creek, keeping an eye on the surroundings, when he noticed faint footprints on the soft earth. They were too large to belong to the Apache woman, and their uneven, hurried patterns suggested haste. His brow furrowed. The wilderness could be dangerous, and he knew that anyone traveling alone could easily become a target for trouble. He urged his horse to move quietly along the path, following the trail without revealing his presence. As he crept closer to a bend in the creek, he saw them, three men, rough and unruly, moving through the trees with a sense of purpose. Their clothing was dusty and worn, and their eyes darted around nervously. It was clear they were looking for something, or perhaps someone. The rancher's instincts screamed caution. From the safety of the shadows, he watched them approach the area where the Apache woman had been bathing that morning. His heart tightened. She was alone, unaware of the danger that had arrived so suddenly. He could see the gentle sway of the trees behind which she had disappeared, and he knew she might still be nearby. The thought of anyone threatening her filled him with a surge of determination. He had made a promise, even if it had been only in his mind at first, and now that promise was about to be tested. The rancher dismounted silently, leading his horse along a hidden path that gave him a better vantage point. He needed to assess the situation carefully. The men were rough, perhaps desperate, and he knew they might not hesitate to use force if they believed they could get what they wanted. Every muscle in his body tensed as he prepared himself for what might come next. Meanwhile, the Apache woman had continued her journey through the forest, unaware that danger was near. She moved with careful steps, listening to the sounds around her, but she had no reason to suspect that anyone was following her. Her mind was focused on her daily tasks, gathering herbs and small provisions for her journey back to her camp. The forest was her home, and she trusted in its protection, not knowing that human threats could be far more unpredictable. The rancher watched the intruders closely, noting their movements. One of them carried a long stick, while another had a small sack slung over his shoulder. Their whispers were low but urgent, and the rancher could sense their frustration. They were searching, and it was only a matter of time before they discovered the creek and the woman he had vowed to protect. He could not wait any longer. Action was necessary. He moved silently, using the natural cover of bushes and trees to approach closer. He wanted to remain unseen until the right moment, to gain the advantage. He observed the men as they drew near the creek bank, their attention still focused on the area where she had been bathing. He could see the anticipation in their eyes, the sense of entitlement, and it made his resolve grow stronger. He would not allow them to harm her. Suddenly, the youngest of the three stumbled on a root and cursed under his breath. The sound carried, and the rancher's heart raced. It was enough to alert anyone nearby. The woman, picking herbs not far from the creek, froze, sensing movement and sound. Her hand instinctively reached for the small knife at her belt. Though she had not seen the men yet, she felt that something was wrong. Her instincts were sharp, and they had never failed her. The rancher moved quickly but cautiously, positioning himself between the intruders and the path she had taken. He knew that confrontation might be unavoidable, but he hoped to use his presence to deter them. He stepped into view, his tall frame casting a shadow over the nearest man. "Hey," he called out, his voice firm and steady. "You don't belong here." The men turned, startled by the sudden appearance of someone they had not noticed. Their eyes widened as they saw the rancher, and for a moment confusion replaced their boldness. But their hesitation was brief. The tallest among them sneered. "Who are you to tell us what to do, stranger?" he growled. The rancher squared his shoulders, his eyes unwavering. "I'm the one who decides what happens here. Leave now and no one gets hurt. Stay, and you'll regret it." His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent years surviving in the wilderness, someone whose courage could not be easily shaken. The men hesitated, weighing their options. They could see that the rancher was not a man to be trifled with, yet they were desperate and bold. The youngest of them whispered something to his companions, and the tension grew. The rancher's mind raced, thinking of the woman who might still be nearby. He needed to ensure her safety before anything escalated. With careful steps, he gestured toward the path where she had gone. "Move away from the creek now. There's someone here who doesn't want trouble, but I won't warn you twice." His tone was firm but calm, showing confidence rather than anger. For a moment, the intruders considered retreating, but one of them lunged forward, testing the rancher's resolve. In a swift motion, the rancher grabbed a nearby branch, using it to block the man's advance. The other two froze, realizing that this was no ordinary encounter. The rancher's skill and determination were clear, and the balance of power had shifted. Suddenly, the rustle of leaves drew the attention of all four people. The Apache woman had emerged from behind a large oak, her eyes wide with caution. She had been watching from a safe distance, trying to understand the situation without revealing herself too early. Her presence gave the rancher renewed determination. He knew he had to act decisively to protect her. "Get out of here," he shouted, his voice echoing through the forest. "Now, before things get worse for you." The intruders, sensing the growing danger and the rancher's unyielding stance, finally began to back away. Their confidence faltered in the face of someone willing to stand firm for the protection of another. Slowly, they retreated, muttering threats under their breath, but it was clear they had no intention of pressing further. The rancher kept his eyes on them until they disappeared into the trees, making sure they posed no further threat. Once the men were gone, the rancher turned to the Apache woman. She approached cautiously, her expression a mixture of curiosity and relief. Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer now, full of genuine concern. She nodded, her dark eyes meeting his. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but steady. You saved me." The rancher shook his head. "I only did what needed to be done. You shouldn't be in danger out here alone." "The forest is beautiful, but it can be unforgiving." His eyes softened as he studied her, realizing that his promise to protect her was not just a fleeting thought. It was now an action that mattered. She looked at him carefully, understanding the sincerity in his words. Though they spoke different languages, the meaning was clear. Trust had been formed in that brief but intense moment, a trust built on courage and the willingness to stand against danger for someone else's sake. For the next few minutes, they remained near the creek, both catching their breath after the tense encounter. The woman studied the rancher with a new respect, noting the strength in his posture and the calm determination in his eyes. She did not fully understand him yet, but she sensed that he could be trusted. The rancher, in turn, watched her, realizing that this chance encounter had changed something in him. Protecting someone, especially someone so connected to the land and so free in spirit, gave him a purpose he had not felt before. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the forest and the creek held many challenges, and that his promise to her would be tested again. As the sun continued to rise, warming the forest and sparkling off the creek, the two of them began to walk slowly along the path together. Not side by side, but close enough that the rancher could keep an eye on her, ensuring her safety. They moved quietly, each step measured, sharing the silence of the forest in a way that felt comfortable. The rancher's mind wandered to the days ahead. He would need to remain vigilant, ready to face any challenge that came their way. But for now, the immediate danger had passed, and he could allow himself a small moment of relief. The woman's presence was calming, yet it also reminded him of the responsibilities he had accepted. The Apache woman, walking carefully through the forest, felt a new sense of security she had not experienced before. Though she was strong and capable, the knowledge that someone was willing to protect her gave her a strange comfort. It did not diminish her independence, but it made her aware that the world could be kinder when people cared for each other. By the time they reached a small clearing, the rancher decided it was time to speak again. "You should stay close to the path," he said gently. "The forest is safe if you know it, but there are always those who might cause harm." She nodded slowly, understanding more than the words themselves. Her eyes conveyed gratitude and a cautious trust. She knew that this man, this stranger, had stepped into her world to protect her, and that was not something she would forget. As the morning moved toward noon, the forest seemed to settle once more. Birds sang, the creek flowed steadily, and the sunlight filtered through the trees. Yet beneath the calm, both the rancher and the Apache woman knew that the wilderness held many more secrets, and that the bond formed that morning would be tested again, in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And so the day continued, with two lives intertwined by circumstance and courage. The rancher's promise to protect her had been fulfilled for now, but the challenges ahead were only beginning. The forest, beautiful and wild, would soon reveal its next trials, and both of them would need to rely on trust, courage, and the growing connection between them to navigate what was to come. The forest was quieter now, though the sound of the creek nearby still filled the air. with its gentle, soothing murmur. The sun had risen higher, warming the leaves and the earth beneath them. The rancher and the Apache woman moved carefully along the winding path, keeping their distance from one another but aware of each other's presence. Both were cautious, yet there was an unspoken connection, a trust that had begun to form in the tension of the morning. The rancher rode slowly, his eyes scanning the trees and the undergrowth for any signs of danger. He had seen enough in his life to know that trouble could appear without warning. But for now, the forest seemed calm, almost as if it were offering a moment of peace after the chaos of earlier events. He let out a slow breath, feeling a sense of relief. Yet he knew the day was not over, and the promise he had made to protect her was far from complete. The Apache woman walked with careful steps, her eyes alert to every sound. Her senses were sharp, honed by years of living close to the land. She had learned to notice the smallest changes in the forest, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the movement of a bird that signaled a predator or stranger nearby. Today, though, she felt a strange comfort in the rancher's presence. Even though they spoke little, even though the words between them were few, she understood that he meant her no harm. He was a protector, and that knowledge gave her a quiet reassurance she had not felt in a long time. As they moved deeper into the forest, the rancher began to notice the small details of her movements. She was light on her feet, moving with a natural grace that made her almost seem a part of the wilderness itself. The way she carefully balanced on rocks, the gentle way she handled the herbs she collected along the path, all of it spoke to someone who understood and respected the land. He found himself admiring her strength and independence, even as he felt the growing desire to ensure her safety. After a while, they came to a small clearing where sunlight poured down in golden beams, illuminating the forest floor. The rancher stopped, dismounted from his horse, and approached cautiously. He wanted to speak, but he also wanted to be respectful of her space. "We should rest here for a moment," he said gently, his voice low so as not to startle her. "You've walked a long way." She looked at him, her dark eyes meeting his. There was a moment of hesitation, and then she nodded slowly. Though she did not speak much, her gesture showed acceptance. She settled on a large rock at the edge of the clearing, folding her hands in her lap, while the rancher leaned against a nearby tree, keeping a careful watch on the surrounding forest. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The quiet was comfortable, filled only with the sounds of nature. Birds chirped in the branches above, and the creek flowed gently nearby. The rancher broke the silence, speaking slowly and carefully. "I don't know your name," he said, "but I want you to know I'll do everything I can to keep you safe." The woman regarded him thoughtfully. She did not speak his language, but she understood his meaning. She had seen it in his eyes, in the way he had confronted the men earlier. It was clear that he meant what he said. She nodded again, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it carried weight. Trust was being built here, silently, without words. The rancher smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in his chest. He had spent many years in the wilderness, alone for the most part, protecting his land and his livestock. But protecting someone like her, someone so connected to the land, so full of life and spirit, felt different. It was not just duty, it was something deeper. A responsibility, yes, but also a quiet honor. As they rested, the rancher noticed a small bundle of herbs lying beside the woman. She had gathered them along the path, her hands nimble and precise. He recognized some of them from his own knowledge of the forest, plants that could be used for medicine, for teas, for healing minor cuts and bruises. He watched her work, impressed by her skill. It reminded him that she was capable, strong, and resourceful. Yet even with all her knowledge and strength, he felt that his presence could provide her with safety she might not otherwise have. After a few moments, the woman rose and began to gather her herbs into a small cloth. She moved with quiet determination, her focus on the task at hand. The rancher stepped closer, careful to give her space, and offered quietly, "If you need help, I can carry some of that for you." She hesitated, looking at him carefully, and then handed him part of the bundle. There was a moment of connection in that small act, a silent acknowledgement that they were now working together, that trust was not just a word but an action. He took the herbs, handling them with care, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had accepted. They continued walking along the forest path, the rancher occasionally glancing over his shoulder to ensure there were no signs of danger. He had learned that the wilderness could change in an instant. Animals could appear unexpectedly, strangers could wander into their path, and weather could shift without warning. But despite the uncertainties, he felt a sense of purpose. Protecting her was no longer a thought. It was a mission he had committed to. The woman walked with him for a while, her eyes scanning the forest, noticing the subtle changes in light and shadow, the movement of small animals, and the signs of the land. She seemed to sense that he was serious about his promise, and that gave her confidence. Though they still spoke little, their actions spoke volumes. They were learning to communicate in ways beyond words, through gestures, glances, and shared understanding. As they approached a bend in the creek, the rancher spotted a small area where the water was calmer, forming a natural pool. He gestured toward it, indicating they could stop and rest again. The woman understood immediately and moved toward the pool, kneeling to touch the water. She dipped her hands in, letting the coolness refresh her face and arms. The rancher watched silently, keeping a careful eye on the surroundings. He felt a protective instinct rise within him, stronger than before. After a few minutes, they sat near the pool, both catching their breath. The rancher spoke softly, trying to bridge the gap between them. "You must know this forest better than I do," he said. "I've spent years here, but there are places I've never seen. You move through it as if you belong to it." The woman glanced at him, a faint smile playing at her lips. Though she could not reply in his language, the meaning was clear. She had always felt at home in the forest, and now, with him nearby, she felt a new layer of security. It was a strange combination of independence and trust, a balance that had not existed before in her life. They stayed there for a while longer, the silence comfortable and reassuring. Birds sang, the creek flowed, and the sunlight filtered through the trees in a golden haze. The rancher felt a deep sense of calm, but he knew that their time of peace was temporary. The world beyond the creek and the forest could be unpredictable and dangerous, and he would need to remain vigilant. Eventually, they continued along the path, moving cautiously but steadily. The rancher noticed the way she navigated the terrain, stepping carefully over roots and rocks, pausing to listen to the sounds of the forest. He admired her attentiveness, realizing that her skills and awareness were as important as his own. Together, they formed a small team, two people moving through the wilderness with a shared understanding of danger and survival. As the day wore on, they came across a narrow path that led to a small hill overlooking the creek. The rancher led the way, careful to keep her on the safer side of the trail. From this vantage point, they could see the creek winding through the valley below, sparkling in the sunlight. The view was breathtaking, and for a moment they paused to take it in. The rancher spoke again, his voice low and calm. "From up here, you can see everything. If anyone were to come this way, we would know before they reached us." He glanced at her, seeing a quiet understanding in her eyes. She nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. They both knew that vigilance was necessary, but in that moment they also shared a sense of wonder and appreciation for the beauty around them. The bond between them grew stronger with each step, each shared glance, and each act of trust. The rancher's promise to protect her had already been tested once, and it would be tested again. But for now, they walked together, moving carefully through the forest, learning from each other and growing closer without needing to speak much. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the rancher realized that his sense of duty had become something more. Protecting her was not just about safety. It was about honor, respect, and a quiet admiration that he could not put into words. And the Apache woman, moving with grace and confidence, had begun to understand that she was not alone, that someone would stand by her side in the face of danger. The forest remained alive with sound, the creek continued to flow, and the sunlight painted everything in warm hues. Yet beneath the calm, both of them knew that challenges lay ahead. They had faced danger together, learned to trust one another, and begun to form a connection that would grow stronger with each passing day. The rancher's protection had become more than a promise. It had become a shared journey, one that neither of them could have anticipated, but both were willing to follow. The forest was alive with the soft sounds of afternoon. The wind whispered through the trees, and the creek shimmered in the sunlight as it wound through the valley below. The rancher and the Apache woman moved carefully along a narrow path that twisted through the dense forest. Their steps were quiet, yet they were fully aware of the world around them. Each of them had learned the importance of alertness and patience in the wilderness, and together they moved with a sense of purpose and mutual understanding. The rancher kept a careful watch over the woman, noting the way her eyes scanned the forest, alert to the smallest movement. She was skilled, graceful, and strong, but he still felt a deep need to protect her. This was not just a sense of duty anymore. It was a genuine desire to ensure her safety. He had grown used to his solitude in the wilderness, but now, sharing the forest with someone else, someone he cared about, made him feel a connection he had never experienced before. The woman, walking beside him, was calm but focused. Her hands occasionally brushed against the leaves or the bark of the trees, her fingers tracing patterns she had memorized from her years in the forest. She had learned to read the signs of the land, the tracks of animals, the way the wind carried scents, and the subtle changes in the soil that indicated the presence of water or danger. Her senses were sharp, and though she moved quietly, she exuded confidence and strength. As they continued along the path, they came across a small patch of wild herbs growing near a fallen log. The woman knelt to examine them, her eyes bright with interest. The rancher dismounted and approached her slowly, curious but careful not to disturb her. "What are these?" he asked softly. She looked up at him and held out a handful of the plants. Though her words were in her own language, he could sense their purpose. She gestured to the leaves and then to herself, indicating that these herbs were used for healing. He nodded, understanding the importance of her knowledge. "You know these well," he said with quiet admiration. The woman smiled faintly, a small gesture of acknowledgement. She began to show him how the herbs could be prepared, using gestures and simple actions. She crushed the leaves gently, demonstrating the process, and he followed her movements carefully. Though he did not fully understand her words, he grasped the meaning through her actions. This shared experience brought them closer together, creating a bond based on learning, trust, and mutual respect. As they walked on, the rancher noticed the sun beginning to lower in the sky. The forest took on a warmer, golden hue, and the shadows grew longer. The woman paused to look around, her eyes scanning the trees as if checking for any signs of danger. The rancher stayed close, feeling a protective urge rise within him. He knew that the forest, beautiful as it was, could hide threats, and he was determined to ensure her safety. They reached a small clearing that overlooked the creek. The water flowed calmly below, reflecting the sunlight in sparkling patterns. The rancher gestured for the woman to rest while he kept watch. She sat on a smooth rock, gathering her herbs into a small bundle. He admired her independence, but he remained vigilant, aware that any moment could bring unexpected danger. After a while, the rancher spoke quietly, trying to bridge the gap between them. "You are skilled in the forest. You know how to survive." He paused, looking at her. "I have lived here for many years, but I could learn from you." The woman regarded him carefully. Though she did not respond in words he understood, her eyes conveyed acknowledgement and respect. She nodded slightly, indicating that she understood his meaning. The rancher felt a sense of satisfaction. Communication was not always about words. Sometimes it was about actions, gestures, and shared experiences. They continued their journey, moving through the forest with care and caution. The rancher helped the woman over difficult terrain, offering a steady hand when she needed it. In turn, she showed him hidden paths and ways to move quietly through the trees. Their cooperation strengthened their bond, each learning from the other, each relying on the other in small but meaningful ways. As evening approached, they came to a shallow part of the creek where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. The woman knelt to wash her hands, the cool water refreshing her after the long day. The rancher watched her, ensuring that no one approached from the forest. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, knowing that his vow to protect her was more than just words. It was now a guiding principle in his actions. After she had finished, the woman looked at him with a small, curious expression. She reached into her bundle of herbs and held out a small leaf to him. He took it, understanding that it was a gesture of trust and perhaps gratitude. He nodded, offering a small smile in return. In that simple exchange, they communicated a connection that went beyond language, a bond formed through shared experiences and mutual reliance. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The rancher suggested they set up a small camp for the night, and the woman agreed, helping him gather materials to make a safe resting place. They built a small fire, careful to keep it contained, and sat near it as the light faded. The warmth of the fire contrasted with the cool evening air, creating a sense of comfort and security. As they sat by the fire, the rancher spoke quietly, sharing stories of his life in the forest. He told her about the cattle he cared for, the challenges of ranching, and the lessons he had learned from years of solitude. Though she did not fully understand his words, she listened intently, watching the flickering flames and observing his expressions. In return, she shared, through gestures and simple actions, aspects of her own life, teaching him about the plants, animals, and ways of her people. The night deepened, and the forest became still. The creek flowed softly in the background, and the stars began to appear in the sky above. The rancher kept watch, his senses alert to any movement in the darkness. The woman rested nearby, trusting in his vigilance. Their bond had grown stronger through the day's journey, through acts of protection, cooperation, and shared understanding. Even as they slept, a quiet sense of connection remained. The rancher's promise to protect her had become more than a fleeting thought. It was now a responsibility he embraced with sincerity and care. The woman, in turn, had come to understand that he was a steadfast presence, someone who could be trusted even in the unpredictability of the forest. As the first light of dawn began to appear, the rancher stirred, checking the perimeter to ensure that no danger had approached during the night. The woman awoke soon after, her senses alert but calm. They prepared to continue their journey, moving together through the forest with a growing sense of companionship. Each step was careful, deliberate, and filled with the unspoken understanding that they were stronger together than alone. The day promised new challenges, yet both of them felt a quiet confidence. They had learned to rely on each other, to trust in their shared skills and knowledge, and to face whatever the forest might bring with courage and determination. The rancher's vow to protect her was no longer a solitary promise. It had become a partnership, a shared mission that both of them embraced. As they walked, the woman pointed out a small clearing ahead, where fresh water and edible plants were abundant. The rancher nodded, impressed by her knowledge and resourcefulness. Together, they moved toward the clearing, ready to gather supplies and continue their journey. Each step reinforced their bond, each moment deepened their trust, and each shared experience strengthened the connection between them. The forest was vast and unpredictable, but for the first time, both the rancher and the Apache woman felt a sense of hope. They were no longer alone in the wilderness. They had found a companion, a protector, and a friend. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but they were ready to face them together, guided by trust, courage, and the quiet strength they had discovered in each other. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the forest with warm light, the rancher glanced at the woman, seeing the determination and confidence in her eyes. He felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility, knowing that he had become a part of her life in a meaningful way. The woman, in turn, acknowledged his presence with a small gesture, a nod of understanding and respect. Together, they moved forward, ready to face the next chapter of their journey through the wilderness. The morning sun broke through the trees, casting golden light across the forest floor. The creek sparkled as it wound through the valley, reflecting the beauty of the day. Birds sang in the branches, and the gentle rustle of leaves filled the air. The rancher and the Apache woman moved quietly along the path, their steps careful, alert, and in rhythm with one another. The bond they had formed over the past days had grown stronger, and a sense of shared purpose guided each step they took. Though the forest appeared calm, the rancher's instincts told him that this tranquility could be deceiving. He had spent years reading the land, understanding that danger could appear where it was least expected. He kept his eyes scanning the trees, his senses alert to every sound, while the Apache woman moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the wilderness intimately. Together, they made a formidable team, balancing caution with courage. As they descended a gentle slope toward the creek, the rancher noticed a faint trail of disturbed earth leading into a dense thicket. His brow furrowed. Someone had been there recently, perhaps the same men who had approached the creek before, or perhaps others with less honorable intentions. He gestured subtly for the woman to stay close, and they moved cautiously, listening to the sounds of the forest and feeling the tension in the air. The woman sensed his concern and slowed her pace, watching the trees and the ground carefully. Though she could not understand all of his words, she had come to trust his judgment and experience. Together, they approached the thicket, ready for whatever might emerge. The rancher's heart beat steadily, not with fear but with determination. He would protect her no matter what. Suddenly, a rustle from the bushes made them both stop. 3 figures emerged, rough-looking men with grim expressions. Their eyes fell on the Apache woman immediately, and the rancher recognized the same boldness and aggression he had seen before. These men were not there for conversation. They were looking to intimidate, perhaps even harm her. The rancher stepped forward, placing himself between her and the intruders. "You will not touch her," he said firmly, his voice carrying across the clearing. His tone left no room for argument. The men hesitated, surprised by his unwavering stance, but they quickly regained their confidence. One of the men sneered, "And who are you to stop us, stranger? This isn't your fight." The rancher's eyes narrowed. "It is now. I warned you once before. Leave or you will regret it." His voice was steady, and his posture showed that he would not back down. He had spent years in the wilderness facing challenges, but protecting someone like her made every risk worthwhile. The men exchanged glances and then lunged forward, trying to intimidate him. The rancher acted quickly, using his knowledge of the land and his strength to block their advance. He moved with precision, staying between them and the woman, ready to defend her with everything he had. The struggle was tense, the forest around them seeming to hold its breath. The Apache woman, seeing the danger, did not flee. She moved to a nearby position where she could assist if needed, her eyes sharp and alert. Though she relied on the rancher to protect her, she also understood the importance of staying aware and ready. Her presence added to the strength of their stand, showing that courage came in many forms. The men tried to approach again, but the rancher's unwavering determination and strategic positioning made it clear that they would not succeed. He spoke firmly, "Leave now or face the consequences. This woman is under my protection and I will not fail her." The men hesitated, sensing the seriousness in his voice and the resolve in his eyes. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to back away, muttering threats under their breath but recognizing that they could not overpower someone so determined and skilled. The rancher kept his eyes on them until they disappeared into the trees, ensuring that no further danger followed. When the men were gone, the rancher turned to the Apache woman. She approached him cautiously, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and admiration. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice filled with genuine concern. She nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. Though she did not speak his language fluently, her expression conveyed gratitude and trust. In that moment, the bond between them was stronger than ever. Words were not necessary. Their actions, their courage, and their shared experiences had spoken louder than any conversation could. The rancher helped her move past the clearing and back to the safety of the path they had been following. The forest seemed calmer now, as if acknowledging the resolution of the danger. The creek flowed gently beside them, its waters sparkling in the sunlight, and the sounds of birdsong returned, soft and peaceful. As they walked, the rancher noticed the way the woman moved with renewed confidence. She had faced the threat with calm and awareness, and he admired her courage. He realized that protecting her was not about controlling or limiting her. It was about ensuring she could move freely and safely, without fear. They reached a small hill overlooking the valley, where the sunlight painted the forest in warm hues. The rancher gestured for her to rest, and they sat side by side, taking in the view. The moment was quiet but filled with understanding and connection. They had faced danger together, relied on one another, and emerged stronger because of it. The woman gathered a few wildflowers nearby and handed them to the rancher, a simple gesture of friendship and gratitude. He accepted them with a small smile, recognizing the meaning behind her action. It was a symbol of trust, respect, and the bond they had formed through shared challenges and quiet moments of understanding. As the day progressed, they continued their journey, moving through the forest with caution but also with a sense of freedom. The rancher remained vigilant, but he also allowed himself to appreciate the beauty around them and the strength of the companion beside him. The woman, in turn, moved with confidence and grace, aware of the protection offered but also fully aware of her own abilities. By evening, they reached a safe clearing near the creek, where they could rest for the night. The rancher gathered firewood while the woman prepared the area, working together in quiet cooperation. The fire crackled to life, casting a warm glow over the forest floor. They sat nearby, sharing the comfort of the fire and the satisfaction of having overcome the day's challenges. The rancher spoke softly, reflecting on the events that had brought them to this point. "I made a promise," he said quietly, "and I kept it. I will continue to keep it, no matter what comes our way." The woman looked at him, her expression calm and understanding. Though she did not speak his language fully, she understood the depth of his words. She nodded, acknowledging not only his promise but also the actions that had proven it true. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, the forest quieted around them. The creek flowed gently, the fire crackled softly, and the bond between the rancher and the Apache woman had reached a point of unspoken understanding. They had faced danger, relied on each other, and grown together through trust, courage, and mutual respect. The rancher kept watch through the night, alert to any signs of danger, while the woman rested nearby. Though they were in the wilderness, they were no longer alone. They had each other, and that made all the difference. The promise to protect her had been fulfilled in the most critical moment, and the bond they had formed would guide them through whatever challenges remained. By dawn, the forest seemed peaceful once more. Birds sang in the trees, the creek sparkled in the morning light, and the rancher and the woman prepared to continue their journey. Though the wilderness was unpredictable, they faced it together, strengthened by trust and courage, and guided by the connection they had formed through shared experience and protection. As they walked along the creek, side by side yet with space to move freely, the rancher felt a sense of fulfillment. He had made a promise, kept it, and found a companion in the process. The Apache woman moved with confidence and grace, knowing she had someone by her side who would protect her if needed but also respect her independence. The forest stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges, beauty, and the unknown. But together, they were ready. Their journey had begun with a simple act of protection, but it had grown into something deeper, a partnership built on trust, courage, and respect. Whatever the wilderness might bring, they knew they could face it together, guided by the promise that had brought them together in the first place. And so, the rancher and the Apache woman continued along the winding path, moving through the forest with confidence, strength, and an unspoken bond that would remain with them forever. The creek sparkled beside them, the sunlight danced through the trees, and the wilderness stretched ahead, full of possibilities, challenges, and the enduring promise of protection and friendship.